Welcome to the Chronically Well podcast, where we hold real conversations with community that need to be heard. On today's episode, I'm joining with Michelle. I know, I follow you via Instagram and everything, and I have this quote where I say, inspire the inspirer. So
Okay.
you truly do that via just showing your presence. Like you are a light that always needs to shine. And I just want to let you know that. And on this platform, I just want to gift you your flowers as I gift all of us our flowers, because here in the presence today, those flowers are meaningful and we should all receive them, because just being able to wake up and smell them just helps us push forward in this journey that we have living with a chronic health condition.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
with
Sometimes we wake up and we have this thing where we're constantly searching for what our purpose is, right? No one area of our life completely defines our life. So you have so many areas that you can kind of pick and choose from. So there are times when, I wake up and I'm like, do I really need to post today? Who's really watching this, right? Who am I truly inspiring? Am I boring people with this stuff? And I think I've kind of unfortunately embodied that for quite some time. So I've taken a break, if you will, from social media just to kind of take a step back from it and not get too far lost in this imposter syndrome, if you will. But having you still say, that based on what I've, shared in the past and everything like that, still continues to inspire other people, even if it's just that one person that it inspires, then clearly I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and doing and living in that purpose, even if I don't feel like doing it every day or actually do it every day, what I've already done and will somewhat continue to do, even though I have to take breaks, I'm still inspiring others. So again, thank you for taking the time to say that.
You're welcome. Imposter syndrome is a true and real thing.
Yeah.
That's why alone this platform, because we know what social media shares and shows us. We know what those algorithms present. So
Hmm.
along this platform, I just want to make sure that we're able to be unapologetically ourselves.
Amen.
Like true indeed. This is going to be the or most organic conversation I hope that you've had in a while, because this is like truly, you're my sister. I'm your
Hmm.
brother. And
Yep.
this is a reunion that is a lifetime in the making. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I thank you for joining me on this journey. Michelle, so we're just getting to know each other. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
All right. Well, my name is Michelle James. I am in my early 40s. I have been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes for probably going on 20 years now, just as old as my one child. I am born in the Caribbean, immigrated to the United States in 97, so about 15, 16 years old, and been living here ever since. I've served time in the military, and I currently work for the federal government. Who am I outside of all of those things? I am just a homebody who tries to do everything and anything from home. If I don't have to leave my bubble, I enjoy that, which is not always the greatest because you have to step outside to meet people as well. But that's pretty much it. I enjoy watching movies. I'm a huge Marvel fan, but don't ask me any questions
Mm.
about the comics because I'm gonna get all of them wrong. I just like watching the movies. And like I mentioned earlier, I have one son who will be 20 years old today. Not today, but this year. And that's pretty much about it. Michelle, type 1 diabetic. Again, even though that doesn't necessarily define my whole life, but Michelle, the homebody, keeps things simple, enjoys meeting new people, but only in certain settings. I enjoy my solace, my solitude, if you will.
I
So,
got you. Michelle, how? You said you're a Marvel fan, but you don't ask you anything about the comics.
no, don't do that.
See, Michelle, I'm going to talk to you like you're my sister, because look, we're from the same era. Like we're both in our early 40s. I turned 41 this year. I turned 41 in January. Uh, 20 years T1D. My T1D turned 21 in March.
Okay.
So like we have a lot of similarities. And when you told me you don't know anything about the comic, really, but I understand. My sister doesn't either. She's 43. But she will watch the movies with me and
Yep.
things like that. Like growing up, she's like, "Boy, I don't know nothing about no Punisher," and no, she knows some names like Wolverine because that's a
Mhm.
big name and whatnot. But like anything else, she's like, "No, no, no, no. Let's talk about
Like
babysitter stuff."
I actually went to not went, but I wanted to start watching the new X-Men '97, and I was like, okay, I have to go back, right, and watch the other stuff first before I watch the new things that they just put on Disney or whatever.
Right.
And even going backwards and watching it, I'm like, who is this and who is this? And wait, oh, she could fly. Why wasn't she flying in the movies? Just going back and forth like that, thinking about it as I'm watching it. So, like I said, I enjoy the Marvel universe, if you will, but don't ask me anything about the comics. So
That's funny. It's funny you say that because when me and my wife first started dating many, many years ago, look, that's about 2 decades ago, that I told her that I was a fan of Star Wars, and
yeah, I'm not.
she had never seen Star Wars. So I told her about like the order of their release. And she was like, why would they do it like that? Why would the one that was released in 1977 be like the fourth episode or whatever? And so what I did for her, like how you just mentioned with like Marvel, how
Mhm.
going back, you're like, why don't they say this person can fly and this and that? Like they mix it up so much.
Yes.
And that's what they do with Star Wars. So I actually showed her Star Wars like in the order that it should be.
Okay.
Like instead of going like, okay, you're going to watch the first one from 1977. No, you're going to watch the literally first episode from 1999, and then we'll go back to the 1977. And she's a huge Star Wars fan now. Like even like I'm not even a Star Wars fan anymore.
Yeah, that was one that I couldn't get into. Star Trek, yes. I think because that's a little bit more futuristic, if you will, than whereas Star Wars, you just, whatever time frame that they're in, and I'm just not grasping that world. So the whole thing is just confusing to me. So that was one actually I did not get involved in. So,
Right.
and even to this day, there's a whole bunch of episodes that's still coming out in little pieces here, there, and everywhere. I'm like, all right, I can't put all this. It's a lot trying to keep up with the Marvel universe as it is. So, and then we're going into different, what do you call it? Not timelines. It's not timelines. Different. Can't think of the word, but everybody living on this parallel timeline type of
Mhm.
thing, but you're in a different universe, if you will,
Different
different
universe.
universe. So it's confusing enough. So I'm just going to stick with Marvel, and not get caught up in anything else.
Look, don't go, don't go down the rabbit hole of
Right,
trying to
right.
figure it out. You'll spend weeks on end watching these, and
Yes.
then at the end you'll be like, why did I watch this? Because I don't even understand. Like seriously, like your son may know a little bit more about it than
Yes.
you. Okay.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, your son's 20 years young, right?
Yeah. Yep.
People always say old. I'm like, I remember when I was 20 and I felt old, but now when I think about it, I'm like 20 is young,
Absolutely.
very young. He's about this around the same age as you were when you were diagnosed.
Hmm.
And to be able to see that trajectory in his life as he's maturing and growing into a man, like I know you like I wonder if you think about like, wow, at 20 years young, I was not only not only did I have a young child, but I also was given the infancy of a chronic health condition.
Right.
Like, wow, like you got twins.
Yep. Yep. And it's so interesting because a while back I did an interview for a health magazine, and that was one of the questions that they asked. Like you know being being young, having a new baby, and being diagnosed, with a chronic illness. How did you manage all of those? And my honest answer was I didn't. My focus was on my child. you would think that your focus would be on your health because you need to be alive to take care of that child, but that's just not how it went for me. Back then I was active duty military, and of course, being diagnosed, I'm in the process of being processed out of the military because of that diagnosis. Because unfortunately, you just can't manage that and be in the Navy and be on sea duty. It's a huge health risk that they're taking, especially when you're, deployed and something goes wrong. How quickly are they able to get me off the ship, depending on where I'm at, and get me to a hospital. So I was processed out of the military. So again, back then, newly diagnosed and with a new baby, I was not necessarily focused on all of the information they gave me or they threw at me when I was diagnosed. I was just more focused on rebuilding my life and providing for my child. So my management suffered for years during the early years of being diagnosed, like to the point of A1Cs in the double digits. You know what I'm saying? Just not managing that well and that kind of stuff. So it was a lot. It was a lot. I'm fortunate to still be here, even though I didn't manage it well in the beginning. But that's how I approached it. I was more focused on my child than I was actually managing diabetes.
You say you didn't manage it well. I've spoken to so many people, and many people say they didn't manage it well in the beginning years. But I've come to a conclusion that it's more so an educational piece that we didn't truly receive, because if we know better, we do better. But at the same time, you had a young child, and I know, having raised 3 young children, my kids are 15, 13, and 10 now today.
Mhm.
And people always ask me, how do you how are you able to take care of these young children? Like, I remember when they were even smaller, like 6, 3, and a newborn. And people always coming up to me and saying, like, how are you able to do that? Like, that's a lot. And I used to
Mhm.
always tell them, these are my children. It's not too much. Like, this is what we do. Like, we have to step into this and
Yeah.
embody it and do whatever we can to educate, guide, uh, do everything we can so that our children can be equally or better people than we are. Like,
Right.
and especially health wise, like a newborn, like being a new parent and taking care of a infant like that, there is no priority greater than that
Right.
ever. So I understand what you say when you like diabetes was basically in your bag. You had to
Right.
carry
Yeah.
everything. You had so much in your front that you had to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And you made the mention that if you know better, you do better. And I can say that a lot of new diabetics will always come in, and if they don't have an engaging endo, if you will, just primary care, sometimes the way that you get information as a newly diagnosed diabetic is the standard where they say don't eat this, don't eat that, don't do this, don't do that, check this, check that. But just giving you the general like that doesn't necessarily work for everyone. I don't in the beginning, I will say for me, my experience was they gave me information, but they just kind of threw the information at me. I don't want to say that they didn't, right? They threw that information at me. But like you said, I had so many other priorities that I wasn't necessarily open or completely open to taking in that information and actually putting it to practice in my life at that time, because again, my priorities wasn't that. It was just, back then I didn't have the insulin pump right out of the gate. So I was doing what people call MDI, multiple diabetic injections, I think is what it's called.
multiple daily injections.
Right there. So but even in doing that, I had the understanding of it because again, I started dealing with diabetes while I was pregnant. So even before my son came along, I had the understanding, the math, the whole, ratio thing and all of that stuff. But again, my priorities wasn't that. And it's interesting that it wasn't, because that's life or death right there, right? If you take too much, it can cause a problem. You don't take enough, it's going to cause a problem. But it was just that your priorities. So like people talk about now, they may not get the information that they need right out of the gate, but it's also, are you ready to take in that information? Because being diagnosed initially, it also comes with pressure, right? Because you have to learn something new, and that's pressure, right? And learning that something new, it's also life altering. That's pressure, right? And then of course, having to learn all of this stuff could potentially bring on depression. This is, again, it's pressure. So I try not to blame the health professionals for how it went for me in the beginning, because it was a balancing thing, right? I had to be open to receiving that information. I had to be open to putting that information to use and to practice, and I just wasn't back then. So did they give me all the information I needed? Not really. But did I even take in what they gave me? Not really. So it's a blame on the both of us. But once I did get to the point where, okay, I felt like I had reestablished my life enough that I can shift the focus a little bit. And honestly, what shifted my focus was, I remember taking a picture of myself and not even realizing how much weight I had lost. Even after being diagnosed and being put on medication and everything, I still lost a lot of weight. And it was interesting that nobody actually said anything to me. So once I saw myself, it kind of kickstart. Okay, I can shift from being that new parent that had to get a new job, that had to make sure life is somewhat back on track, and I can cover bills and stuff like that, to, all right, it's time to start paying attention to my actual health. And the insulin pump came into play, and it made a big difference. So.
Right. You spoke of life or death. So when it comes to a child, like you said, that's priority number one.
Mm-hmm.
So we know as parents that even like when our babies are newborn, that's like one of our top concerns, is making sure that like through the night we spy on them, we hold them, we check their breathing, their heart. Like I told my kids this as they're older now, and they're like, "You did what?" And I said, I would spend hours on end all night in that room with y'all. Like I had to make sure you were breathing, like seriously. And they're like, "That's crazy." I'm like, as a parent, the things that we will do, like parents that truly parent and do everything they can for their child to make sure that their child lives this sustainable, healthy life. Like this is what we do. So like I truly understand what you say when you like your health wasn't priority. It wasn't even a thought. It was like, okay, I have this Band-Aid that's keeping me well. Like
Yes,
seriously.
exactly.
So let me put all my focus on my child. And that also makes me ask, like, do you recall in those early years of diagnosis? Because I mean, you're mothering and nurturing an infant, running around with a toddler, things like that. Do you recall any incidents that occurred, such as like hypoglycemic incidents?
Oh yeah, the hypo is low, right? Is
Yes.
low. Hyper. No, I didn't have the hypo. I had the hyper.
Okay.
Hyper, because like I said, in the early years, I was diagnosed officially diagnosed as a type 1 in 2005. I had dealt with gestational throughout 2004, because that's when my pregnancy was. My son was born late in 2004. I didn't get an insulin pump until 2007. So those, like I said, those first 2 years, I didn't manage well. So I didn't have the lows. I was dealing with a lot of highs, because even throughout that time frame, my A1Cs were double digits, like 13, 14, those type of digits. So I dealt a lot with nothing permanent, fortunately, but I dealt a lot with vision impaired. I couldn't see some when I wake up in the morning because I've been high for so long. It took a long time for my eyes to focus. Of course, when you're high a lot, you're drinking more water, you're going to the bathroom more. You're constant. You know what I'm saying? I dealt with a lot of those, and because I wasn't checking as often as I should be, checking, pricking my fingers and that kind of stuff. Sometimes I would just take insulin, just to take insulin to kind of give me a baseline, because during my pregnancy they gave me the two insulin, which was the slow acting, the fast acting. Right. Once I was diagnosed, they just went to fast acting. I wasn't necessarily taking a lot of long acting insulin. So it's like that's why I had to take it constantly. Like every meal, you have to take a shot, so on and so forth. So during those years, I definitely dealt with a lot of highs. I never went to the hospital for any reason. I kind of just toughed it out, even with DKAs, right? And those you're supposed to go to the ER with, because you need fluids and that kind of stuff. But I felt the onset of those, and I would start drinking even more water and just trying to maintain it at home, because I did not like being in the hospital, and I already knew what would come. And again, in my mind, I'm thinking single parent, young child, in a state, in a city that I'm not from, because I chose to stay where I'm at, which is Virginia Beach, Virginia. But at the time I was in Norfolk, so it's like, the cities are pretty close to each other. But I chose to stay in this state after getting out of the military, because I felt like it best positioned me to get the job that I wanted. So being here, I don't have family here in this state. So again, you're taking on all of these different things. I don't have time to be sick. I don't have time to be in nobody's hospital. I got a young child at home that, unfortunately, at that time, I couldn't really depend on anybody or trusted anybody to leave my child with. So definitely dealt with a lot of more highs, which is hyper, than I did lows.
When you stated about possibly going through DKA and self-treating, like, I remember those days. And I've always told people this, like, growing up, I was like this huge, like, fitness fanatic, like fitness junkie, and exercise routinely, like nonstop, whatnot. And I always felt like I had a high thresh for pain, like a high tolerance.
Okay.
So when I would get sick in those early years, and like I'm vomiting and can't focus and whatnot, I just was like, I treated it like it was like a stomach virus, or like food poisoning. That's what I used to tell people. Like, I have food poisoning. That's what it felt like to me. Not knowing that, oh wow, like today, now I know better. Like,
Right.
I didn't know back then, like, okay, this could kill me. I really didn't know.
Right. Yeah.
And I also wonder if, because of like your background, your mentality, military trained, like, was that do you think that could have been a big part of why you had like that strength, that inner strength and mental strength to be like, I can handle this on my own?
No, I think it's more of a stubborn personality. You get to a point where this gonna work. This has to work. We ain't got no other choice. This is what I'm doing. This gonna work. This has to work out. You keep telling yourself this has to work out, because I can't do this. This right here is the only choice that I have. It really wasn't, but I'm telling myself that at the time. This is my only choice. This has to work, right? Because back then, yes, I before the military, I ran track. I ran track in the Caribbean. I ran track when I went to school in the U.S. Then I joined the military. So I've always been physical in some way, shape, or form. But once I got out of the military, I was dealing with everything that I was dealing with in that time frame. In my head, I told myself, I'm skinny enough. I ain't got to work out. So I was not working out. Again, focus wasn't there. It wasn't on my physical health and that kind of stuff. My focus was, I need to do these certain things to make sure I can provide for my child. That's where the focus was. So I can't truly say that because I had, the mental or physical strength coming out of the military is why I was able to get through that time frame. It could be, but I wasn't thinking that. I was being stubborn.
And people who may have seen you on a regular and knew so much about you, they probably didn't even notice like the ins and outs that you were going through with diabetes.
Yeah.
Like, and I've noticed this also, like people don't notice the highs. We feel that burn. We feel it, especially now that we're more aware of it. But they like most people fear like the lows, like they truly fear them.
Yeah, yes, I do that because I have the understanding, and I might be wrong in this understanding, but my understanding is a low will kill you faster than a high.
It's that direct.
I don't play around with that.
Right, because of
Especially for me, when it comes to a low now, and it's been like this for a while, I don't necessarily feel a low until I'm already in the 30s.
same.
That I'm beyond the point of no return at this. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel it. I don't get the sweats until I'm in the 30s. So for me, my settings are as soon as I hit 80, it's letting me know, hey, you going down in the wrong direction. So I try to address that as quickly as possible because I know when I feel it, it's already past. I'm already in the danger zone.
Right. So that
Right.
that hypoglycemic episode can lead directly to I call it a hypocomplication, which could be death, accidents, seizures, us not being able to focus on any task at hand. So anything can happen indirectly or directly towards us. Hyperglycemic episodes such as having lingering high blood sugars will lead to complications in the long run, not short term. So I do understand that correlation with most of us fearing that low first. And also like if you have family members, friends, significant others that know about hypos, like when they see them, like they truly go into a state of shock and panic because when we're severely low, at times we can't truly comprehend what's going on.
Right, you can, right. And I tell, especially at work, I tell people you can, even though you may not see the physical onset for me, or I may not be feeling it, you can tell when I'm going into a low because I'll start speaking slower. You can tell I'm taking more time to think about what I need to say before I'm saying it. I'm starting to slow down. Like you said, you can't focus. So of course I might be sitting there staring off, right? I'm not focusing in on any one thing. But again, for me, once that start, I'm already in the danger zone. Because sometimes I end up, of course there's times when you may miscalculate something, right? Or you may not account it for all of the factors. You may have counted right. Okay, I'm about to eat 30 grams of carbs. For me, it's 1 to 10. That's 3 units of insulin. Tell the insulin pump that. But sometimes I forgot because I've been walking outside for 30 minutes and then I came in and decided I was going to eat 30, grams, but not thinking, okay, my body's already burning stuff. So I don't necessarily need a full 3 units. I just need 1.5. Okay, I didn't take all of that into account. I just gave myself 3 units. And then, you start eating, you ate, and the next thing you know, you're nose diving, right? You're not just going from 95 to 90 to 85. No, you went from 95 to 75 to 45. That's how quickly you're dropping, and it's, letting your sensors know, if you will, or whatever. And if you're not wearing sensors, again, if you're like me, you don't feel it. And I won't feel it until I'm already down in the 30s, right? The sweats will come out, the slow talking will start. Sometimes I feel like my tongue goes numb. The focus is lost. And so, yeah.
So everyone who does not live with insulin dependence, I hope that you truly understand, or well, you'll never understand. It's an inner working, inner body experience, unless you're the person living with it, or you're a parent that's raising a child with it, then you truly don't understand the feels of living with insulin dependence, diabetes, because to us, like, it's, even if we were gifted the opportunity to write a book on it, a novel on it, we truly can't fully explain it because it's like a out of body experience,
Yeah.
altered mind experience, all of those things. So with this podcast, I hope it gives the opportunity for people just to understand a little bit more of the ins and outs of our 24/7 nonstop existence living with diabetes.
What if your whole body hurts?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was listening. You had something playing in the background.
I turned it off.
Okay. All right. I was like, is she listening to affirmations?
No, I'm actually sitting here learning about, because as a woman in her early 40s, unfortunately, some people start the whole body change thing way earlier, and then of course, I have a chronic disease that I'm managing, so you have to take that into account with the potential that your body might be starting to change earlier rather than later. Right. So I'm dealing, even though I like to work out and all this other stuff, I'm still dealing with a lot of like pain in my shoulder for no reason. Like I didn't hurt it. I didn't pull anything, but sometimes my shoulder feels like it's locking in place, and it's starting to happen, in other joints. So I'm like learning about how the changes in your hormonal levels can cause other problems. Right.
Michelle,
so yes.
Do you have frozen shoulder?
I don't, but one of my shoulders, I wouldn't say it's frozen because I still have mobility in it. I can move it certain places. I can still, do all of that stuff, but I feel it. And I know that I didn't do anything to injure that shoulder. And it's actually been like that for years. So I learned that part of being a diabetic, you can end up with a frozen shoulder without even injuring it. But I don't necessarily think in my case that it's the diabetes that brought it along. I think it's more that I am experiencing perimenopause because it's not just my shoulder anymore.
Got you. Understood. Look, I dealt with shoulder issues for probably upwards of 12 to 14 years. And I remember getting like cortisone shots, injections, and it took until 2020 for me to, I was seeing a rheumatologist, and I had to get an ultrasound because like x-rays weren't showing anything. Like my shoulders, at one point, my shoulders had got so bad. Like I could go like 2 or 3 years with them without an issue, but then it would just flare up out of like nowhere. And I had no clue what it was coming from. I didn't know about frozen shoulder then. But I went and got an ultrasound and found out that I had like 4 different tears in both my shoulders.
Oh, wow.
And the rheumatologist just put it off like, oh, it's nothing. They're minor. They'll heal. And I'm like, I've been going through this on and off for like 12 to 14 years. So he put in a script for me to see physical therapist. And when I went there and she reviewed everything, and she was like, you have frozen shoulder. And I said, wow. I said, all of these doctors, they've never mentioned it to me at all. And they're like, well, you work out and you do this and that, you live this healthy lifestyle, so you should be fine. Your A1C has been under 7 for so long and this and that. And I'm like, and she told me, it doesn't matter how well your diabetes cared for. There are some complications that are inevitable. Like you can't, like some things that's like we are not in full control of.
Right.
So that's what made me think
I definitely learned about with the frozen shoulder related to diabetes maybe a few years ago as well. Because initially when it started hurting, I think I did just Google search, and I try not to do, I do Google search because, like you just mentioned, sometimes you go to the doctor for certain things and they kind of brush you off, right? Instead of digging a little bit deeper. So of course I end up online researching stuff, and I always try to link it back to diabetes because that's what I'm living with. And I learned about the frozen shoulder, but within a year or two of the shoulder started hurting, I started getting inflammation in other areas of my body. And of course, back then I didn't correlate it to perimenopause, but then a lot of other things for me started happening, and I'm just like, this can't all be diabetes, right? Because like you said, yes, we have the understanding that even if you're managing it as best as you can, and you're keeping and showing good numbers, your blood work is showing up well, you're doing your eye test and your foot test and all this stuff, and everything is still good, because you have this chronic disease, because you are taking a synthetic medicine, because your body's not able to do everything it's supposed to do because that one organism working properly, you still inevitably are going to end up with complications because of that diabetes, right? So for me, again, I thought it was diabetes related when it first started, but then I realized, and it took a while for me to realize it, because again, you're not putting everything all together, but eventually I did, and it was like, yeah, okay, I get it. My hormones are imbalanced. There's a shit ton of inflammation in my body that I'm just trying to find a more holistic route of addressing it, because I just don't want to keep taking medicine that can help one thing and then cause another problem. So then I need medicine for that problem, which leads to another problem, which I'm trying to avoid that as best I can. So yeah, totally get it.
Truly understood.
That is just getting older.
And also, living with a chronic health condition or autoimmune conditions such as type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is an inflammatory disease, and usually when you have 1, 2 to 3 may follow, such as other inflammatory autoimmune conditions such as celiac or Addison's, Hashimoto's, like all of those things. They're all inflammatory, and I do shoot for that holistic approach as well.
Yeah,
because we're already taking a man-made insulin.
Yes. And I have to fight. I fight my endo and even my primary care, because I have both of them. I get blood work done twice a year. I go and get my eyes checked once a year. They'll see certain things on my blood work and, try to recommend or, strongly recommend that I take certain medications. And I'm like, I'm not taking it. I'm not doing that. We're going to have to find a different way to address. The only medication I am taking, because it's needed, is insulin. I'm not taking anything else.
That life for death, I hear. Those other medications, like if they're not life or death,
right?
Like, please share with me a holistic approach.
Like I go in and they're like, your cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, whatever it is, a little bit elevated. You should take this medication. I'm thinking that isn't that going to put a strain on my kidneys, on my liver, whichever one of them. You end up with problems because of this medication. I'm not taking that. I'll change my diet. I'll try not to put butter in everything. I was just I'm not taking it.
Let me add a few more gallons of water.
right.
Flush it all out.
So I was just reading up how for me that maybe I need to implement some type of magnesium into my supplements, to try to help out with different things, because for the longest I thought that me not sleeping throughout the night was just because I have diabetes, and sometimes my pump will wake me up throughout the night, only to realize that's not why you're waking up. You got other issues. Like, but dang, you think you fix one thing and it just, you find more stuff.
It's a Band-Aid. It's not a fix. That's how, that's how medicine works in general.
That's definitely how I'm trying to address certain things. It's just, okay, I'm having this problem. I need to go to the root cause of the problem and stop putting Band-Aids on stuff. What is the root cause of this problem? Let's address that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Speaking of root, you mentioned early on that you're Caribbean descent. Where's your nation of origin?
I was born in Trinidad, but raised in Grenada. So I typically tell people I'm half and half. I claim both islands because, again, I was born in one, left that island, left Trinidad when I was maybe about 6 or 7 years old, and then moved to Grenada and lived there until 15, and then I moved to the United States. My mom is Trinidadian. My dad is Grenadian, and even though my mom loves to completely claim Trinidad, it's the same thing for her. It's just you just happen to be born there because your parents
I
kind of moved
understand.
for a little while, and then we came back to Grenada. Predominantly, our family is Grenadian. It's just a few of us that was born in Trinidad. So
Your family's Grenadian, but your mom is Trinidadian.
right,
To the heart,
right.
and I
So that's
know
what I always
that.
tell people I'm half and half. So
Yeah, Trinidadians, like, I'm nothing else. This is what I am.
right.
Yeah, my children, their grandmother and that side of the family, they're Trinidadian, and I know, like, and you know what's funny? Like, they claim, like their grandmother, she'll claim like all of these other heritages before like American. Like she'll be like, my great grandmother is Indian and Asian, like this stuff. But she would like before she'll start naming all these other things before actually mentioning like American. And I understand.
I get it. I get it. For me, I haven't forsaken the Caribbean side, but I've been in America long enough that I don't have as thick of an accent anymore. And it's interesting because my son was just asking me about that the other day. He's like, why is your accent not as thick? And I was just like, it's because my audience is not Caribbean people, right? If I'm around my family, not just the accent switches back on, but the dialect will switch back on as well. If I'm at work, I'm working with a bunch of Americans, I kind of have to speak that way so they can understand what I'm saying. So this is just how I am. It's not that I'm trying to hide it or anything like that, but it's just who my audience is and who I'm talking to. So
Right. It's as we've matured, we've learned and grown about and learned more about how to adapt. So it's an adaptive thing. It's not, you're not putting on an imposter syndrome at work.
Right.
You're just adapting to that place, your place of employment and the audience, like you said.
Yeah.
So you grew up more so Grenadian, right?
Yes.
So how was that transition going from there to here in these United States?
So the biggest thing that stood out to me moving from the Caribbean to the United States, moving from the Caribbean to New York, Brooklyn, the biggest thing that stood out is the damn weather. I was not prepared for that at all. Like, I remember that first year, I think there was a storm up there. So, you got blizzard and stuff. It's just that was the biggest thing.
Was that like the blizzard of 96?
I thought it was 97.
Somewhere.
If it was 96, then it was right before I got there. But we had something else because I know we experienced some other stuff.
Right,
That's the biggest thing for me. The other thing was actually coming into this environment and again in the wintertime getting the flu for the first time. Right? That wasn't fun either. Like the flu, like delirious, the flu, temperature, body temperature so damn high. You don't even know what's going on, sick. Another big thing is I went from attending a school where you wore a uniform to now you have to keep up with the fashion. I wasn't used to that. Like, I'm used to putting on the white shirt, the pleated skirt, the white socks, the black shoes, and a tie, right? And then coming here and getting picked on because you're not wearing the latest sneakers. Back then was, Jordans and stuff like that. Not wearing, the latest sneakers and none of that stuff. I didn't care about stuff like that. And it's so crazy because even though I ended up in Brooklyn, melting pot to the Caribbean, well, really the world, but there's different sections with people from no matter where you're from. But most of the people that I were around were people who either were also born in the Caribbean and then immigrated here, or their parents immigrated there here, and they were just first generation American. So it wasn't people that didn't necessarily understand the culture that I came from. But I mean, again, we're in Brooklyn, New York. You got to keep up with the fashion and that kind of stuff. When you get to school, unless you're gonna get picked on, type of stuff. So that was a big difference, a big culture shock for me. And then again, I was also at an age where you're coasting towards the end of high school, so you have all these plans of what you're going to do for in the Caribbean. Excuse me. In the Caribbean, we call it dances up here, prom and all of this other stuff. The way lessons are taught in school was different. Everything up here is all multiple choice tests. You teach to the test type of stuff. That's not how it is. That's not how it was for me in the Caribbean. Like, you went in to take exams and you had to actually know the answer because they're giving you multiple choice. And then, of course, half of your answers has to be like essay type answers. So, it was a lot of work.
There was no A, B, C, D.
Right.
and you could, like, this is funny.
Right.
I was in school, like I was very like a very good kid, very good student. But I remember sometimes getting like bored of certain things and just being like A, B, C, D, A, B, like just going like creating basically an algorithm in my head. Like, okay, I'm gonna pick 2 C's, then a B, then an A, because I was like tired of it. Like, especially like having to do state testing, which seemed like it came like every spring when in the spring is like when us as youth, like, we're like trying to get out and enjoy life so much more. But now you're locked in this building filling in these bubbles. I remember those bubble forms.
Yeah. And then of course the other thing with schools is the words were different, because of course in the Caribbean you learn the English way of doing everything, spelling words, metric, all of that stuff, and then you have to switch it when you move to the United States. For me, even though the United States have a that age thing where you're a certain age when you're in a certain grade, if you will. When I moved to the United States, I was technically put back a year, but if I had started school in the United States, I would be where they put me. So in the Caribbean, I would have finished high school in '99, whereas when I moved to the United States, I was put back a year to be in the right age group, if you will.
What do you have, a fall birthday? Is your birthday after September?
It's a September. My birthday is actually in September, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It wasn't like it was in November or something, right? But in the Caribbean, I would have actually finished school in '99, whereas in the United States, I graduated high school in 2000. So even though they put me back a year, I was still ahead because most of the classes that they were teaching, they had already gotten the equivalent from my report cards and stuff like that. So yeah. That was another difference here.
Yeah, 3 of my siblings were all born, 2 in November and 1 in December. So like their graduation was like at age 17. And that's what yours should have been. But since I guess it's only because you came from the Caribbean did they put you back a year, because there were people.
It's funny you say that, because I actually did graduate at 17. Again, if I was in the Caribbean, I would have graduated even earlier.
Okay.
Because when I graduated high school in 2000, so that would put me I wouldn't be turning 18 until 2000, and I remember turning 18 in boot camp. So yeah.
Speaking of boot camp, I did want to ask you this. How was that, having to be discharged Was that like you going into the military? Were you in the Navy?
Yes.
You going into the military, into the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
into that prestigious academy, and having acquired diabetes. We all know once you get this, you're discharged. Even though they'll say like, okay, you get this honorable discharge,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing that you dedicated so much of you to that. I recently recorded with someone who lives in Miami, and she was also in the military. I think she was in the Air Force, and she was diagnosed while she was in the military. Another woman of color, and I know how that affected her. Now you knew what you wanted to do. You knew, you knew your basically your life journey and path.
Mm-hmm.
When you got that diagnosis, I know that it, I know that that diagnosis gifted you a better opportunity or chance at life, because if you didn't get the diagnosis, we know what that alternative is. But at the same time, you were this person who did everything they could to become that adult you were becoming.
Mm-hmm.
Did that diagnosis, not did that diagnosis, but how did that alter you and change you?
So the initial diagnosis, kind of, it brought on the fact that there was a great chance that I wouldn't be able to stay in the Navy. And being that at the time I had never been, disciplined, I passed all my physical tests, I advanced very quickly, all of these things. I thought I had that to help bolster me. And keep me in the Navy. So I actually fought them on discharging me. And it took about a year and a half going back and forth with them, fighting them on it, because I was just like, because I'm diagnosed doesn't mean I can't do my job. It just means I can't be on a ship. I can't be deployed. There's other ways to accomplish sea duty in the Navy, and of course that's what I was hoping that they would go for that, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way. And of course at the time I didn't see it as a blessing. First of all, I got this disease I got to manage. I didn't see that as a blessing. Being forced out and having to restart my life, I didn't see that as a blessing. And we all know that hindsight is 2020. And now, yes, I see that change being a blessing, because at that time I was also a single parent. So if you're still in the United States Navy and you have to go on sea duty, you have to make the decision to leave your child behind with somebody else, right? For them to take care, you have to turn over power of attorney and all of this stuff for them to take care of your child while you're out to sea. And at that time, it's not that I didn't have the support system to pull that off. I'm a new parent. I'm not trusting of everybody, unfortunately. Even if you have, great family members and that kind of stuff, I did not want to leave my child. And I think that also stemmed from my mom moving from the Caribbean to the United States to make a better life for us. And in doing so, have to leave us behind initially. Right? I'm not saying it was a wrong decision, but it still affected me in that way. So I think that played a role in me not wanting to leave my child. So as much as I didn't want to get out of the Navy, and I didn't realize it then, it is a blessing that I was diagnosed, because it stopped me from having to continue with this commitment to the United States Navy and in turn leave my child behind. I have to depend on somebody else to raise him. So yes, I may not have seen that initially, but hindsight is 2020. So, yep, I got to raise my child.
That was 20 years ago.
Yep.
And like Yeah, 20 years ago. So, because you were initially diagnosed with gestational while you were pregnant,
Yeah.
correct?
Hmm.
And I know people who were more recently diagnosed over the last year or two that were in the military. And you would think over 20 years that a lot of the bylaws and things would be changed because of the advent of continuous glucose monitors,
Hmm.
different types of insulin. And we know that within any system or job, no matter what kind it is, that there are opportunities to work not only remotely, but you don't have to be on the vessel. You don't have to be on the aircraft. You don't like different things of that.
Right.
And
Right.
just hearing you say that that was 20 years ago and knowing that 20 years later, it's still the same.
Yeah.
And for like a young child that has dreams of going into the military 20 years ago, one may have thought and said to that child, like, in 20 years, things will be things will change. You will be permitted or allowed to. But knowing your story and other people's stories that I've spoken to, I know that today that's not an option.
No, and I feel like I'm not making an excuse for the military in any way, shape, or form, and I don't fully understand how the other branches work. But again, for the Navy, you have to be sea ready, right? You have to be at a given notice because that's what the Navy is, right? A large portion of your duty is being at sea on any one of these vessels. So not being able to be sea ready, I get it, and then again, I can send you to different overseas duty stations again, which can be considered sea duty. However, if I have a chronic disease, that limits where I go as well, right? So all of my duty stations would have to be somewhere stateside so that I am close to these hospitals, whether it be a military hospital or just the civilian hospitals, so I need to be close. So putting all of those restrictions on me, and then them not maybe initially investing even more into me. I mean, they're not losing out on the investment, so that's why they're quick to discharge you from the military. And for diabetes, it's unpredictable, right? What you did yesterday may have worked for you in what you eat, how much you bolus and everything. You could turn around today and attempt to eat the same exact thing in the same order at the same time and end up needing more or less insulin because there's other things happening in your body that you may not account for. So again, it's not always predictable. So it sucks. I didn't want to get out of the military. If I was still in today, I would be at my 23-year mark, 24-year mark, heading into 24 years. But that's not the path I had to be on, or the path that I had to walk. I may not be in the military anymore, but I still work for the U.S. Navy actually. So just on the civilian side.
Look, you're still doing the things that you choose and want to do in life. The
Yeah.
military did gift you an opportunity to broaden that,
Yes.
and you chased your dreams. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the number one thing. You chased your dreams. You attained your dreams.
Yeah.
And we also know like your number one goal in life was that child. Like,
Yes.
seriously,
Yes.
seriously,
Yeah.
raising your boy, and I can tell like every time I mention your child, you smile, you light up because you're a mother, you're a parent, and
Yeah.
that's what you do because that boy gave you a greater sense of life and
Mm-hmm. And a great
everything.
purpose. Absolutely.
He's absolutely perfect to and for you, right?
Yep.
That's how it's
Yep.
supposed to be. Has diabetes in general affected any of your relationships, whether it's significant others, friendships, family?
I would have to say yes on a emotional level, because in the beginning, and not necessarily right at the beginning, but even as you walk your path as a diabetic, there's certain things you don't understand, but as time goes on, you start correlating them and you get an understanding of it, if you will. So for the longest time, I didn't realize that my highs and lows affected my mood, right? You know, and there are times when you'd have friendships or even work relationships, work colleagues and stuff like that, that would always call me moody. Would say that I was being mean or short with people and stuff like that. And it's, I came to realize that it wasn't that I was being mean to the person or short. I mean, of course, I'm not devaluing how they perceived it. But for me, it's like if I get to a stage where I'm just more focused in on the diabetes that day, I'm struggling with the lows, I'm struggling with the highs. I'm just overall depressed because, my devices was going off all night long, so I didn't get a good night's sleep, or so on and so forth. But if my focus is just on the diabetes, because again, people don't always realize how much thought process goes into managing this disease, I may not be as talkative, right? I may not be as social with a person. So in my head, it's just I need to get to work, I need to get my work done, I need to go home. But in between all of that, I'm constantly focusing on the diabetes. So that will make me quiet, if you will. So for a very long time, I didn't realize that I was doing that, being short with people, cutting people off, and that kind of stuff. And I've come to understand it now. So if I'm not having the greatest day, I am more vocal in letting people know, okay, today I'm having a diabetic day. So if I'm not as talkative, I give that notification, especially if I have to be in the office around other people. I give that notification so that people don't take it personal because I'm not being social while I'm in a social setting, even though I'm supposed to be at work doing work. As far as it affecting personal relationships, significant others and stuff like that, I don't necessarily have any example of how it's done that. But then there's also the fact that I've been single for a very long time. So yeah.
Living with type 1 diabetes and relationships, I see exactly what you're saying about how it does affect relationships. Knowing that you're able to share with other people and they're able to comprehend the fact that you're having a diabetes day, that's nothing short of like immaculate itself, because we know the traumas of living with this condition.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to actually let people know, like, this is what today is, and them to accept that means a lot. And you sharing that right there, hopefully it will help other people once they are able to tune into this and hear that, because it's almost like you gifted a blueprint to, if your diabetes isn't going well today, meaning like, I'm going to still compare your diabetes to an infant. Like, it's a newborn. If that baby isn't having a great day, you do whatever you can to make sure that that baby is well.
Right.
So it's like you're taking your baby to a childcare setting and you letting them know that my child is feeling this way today. So be wary of this, just in case they start screaming, just in case my CGM starts screaming, just in case you see me not fully focused on the task that's at hand, or me having to get up and go to the restroom or whatever. Like, my baby, my baby is just trying to be its best. My baby that is diabetes is just trying to be its best.
Yeah.
And every day is a learning and more maturing and growing process.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, eventually, hopefully one day this diabetes will grow up and go off on its own. Maybe
Right.
it'll stop through every now and then to say hi, give me calls to remind me that you are a diabetic. Like, but with the advent of technology and the algorithms at hand and working on faster acting insulins and smart insulins, things like that, I have it in my mind, like in the near future, that diabetes care will be a lot less straining and strenuous, because when I see people that were diagnosed 60, 70 years ago, and I've spoken to them and they're like, although there isn't a cure today, they're like, it's so much better than what I had, what I grew up with.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some of the devices from back in the 90s and the 80s. I'm like, what the hell? What in the world? Okay,
Right.
yeah. Mm.
People having
Yeah.
boil needles, sharpen needles, like
So right.
they had a needle sharpening block. Like
Right.
that,
So
yeah,
and nobody, a lot of times people won't say, I'm thankful that I got this, this disease A, B, C, or D. Like I remember, we going through 2020, 2021 and 2022, with this, even though it's still here today, COVID, right? In the beginning, that shit was just extremely scary, right? And when I actually got COVID, I didn't say I'm thankful I got COVID. I said I'm thankful I got COVID in the time frame that they had already created Paxlovid, right? Because that made my symptoms minuscule compared to what someone who had a chronic disease and then got that virus on top of it and what they had to deal with. For me, it was like as disgusting as Paxlovid was to take. I am fortunate that when I did get COVID, this was already available as an option, and I was all over that. So
right. I actually took Paxlovid twice, but just to know, I mean, because when we think about March 2020,
right.
and I remember when the NHS released its findings on people with diabetes and COVID, like that was traumatic. I was going to say
It was because
like,
I'm already fearful, and now you're adding more fear. And because I'm so fearful, I'm likely to kill myself with bleach because I'm so damn fearful, right?
It's like
I'm
fear
constantly
mongering.
cleaning. Right. So, but yeah, I get it. I totally get it. So,
So so it actually did change a lot of us. And I mean, the pandemic, one thing I can say that has been beneficial to me is the ability to form and join more communities.
yes,
That's
I can absolutely relate to that because, like I said earlier on, I enjoy my solitude. I don't mind going out every now and again, but I feel like I get drained very quickly when I'm in social settings. So it's far and in between that I attend a lot of things. I am the type to wake up and walk around this house with a bonnet on, PJs, food, easily accessible, and a bunch of movies, and I am absolutely content. However, I can attest to becoming more a part of the diabetes community during that time frame. Like, and I'm fortunate that I found all of those, because now if I happen upon any new diabetics, I can point them in that direction, because when I was diagnosed, I didn't have this community. And I wasn't necessarily searching for it either, because again, I like my solitude, so I'm just going to figure things out as I go. But not everyone is like that. Some people need that support, right? So, and as much as I enjoyed being in this community, I wanted to share it with other people. So 2020, 21, 22 definitely opened me up to these communities, and I'm definitely fortunate for that, because I've virtually met quite a few interesting people. So Yeah.
And you are one of those interesting people that I have met. So Michelle, what are some things that you feel as though or maybe misunderstood about you and living with diabetes?
I think the biggest thing that is misunderstood is that I have it all together. Nobody does. I manage it well. That's because I'm kind of obsessive about it, and sometimes that's not a good thing. I don't have a disability. So if I never told you that I was a diabetic, everybody just thinks I'm perfectly healthy. And even after I've told people I'm a diabetic, they just think, okay, she's perfectly well. She doesn't have a disability. That's not considered a disability. It's just, yeah, I think that's the biggest misunderstanding.
Yeah. People, they truly, like I said, they truly don't understand it unless they know someone who's managing it. Like, not even know someone who's managing it. You have to actually be helping manage it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Because even though, I've been at the job that I am at now, I've been with this agency for going on 8 years. I've been working in the same environment for the last 8 years, and people just assume, that it's not hard for me, or they take my model of being a diabetic and unfortunately place it, or my template, and place it on others. So sometimes I have to correct people in doing it. Like, don't do that, right? Because you see me and I'm a certain size doesn't mean a person who's a different size from me doesn't have the same disease or is managing it the same way. Not managing it, but doesn't have the same disease as I do. They may have to manage it completely different. It might, present differently for them, but it doesn't make it seem like they're doing something wrong because I'm doing it this way, right? We all have to manage it as best for us and our lifestyles and so on and so forth. Find myself a lot of times correcting people with the whole type 1 and type 2 and which one is worse and blah, blah. Disease is a disease. All of them is bad.
Right. Chronic health condition is a chronic health condition.
Right. All of them bad.
I wouldn't wish it upon anyone.
Right. I don't want anybody having to deal with any type of daggone affliction. You know what I'm saying?
Right. The nuances of managing is not something that anyone should have to do.
Right. So no one disease is worse than the next. It's just how it affects that person and the way that they have to live their life managing it. It may be a lot, it may not be a lot. And again, because you can look at me and assume that I manage it well, it doesn't necessarily mean that I manage it well. It could simply mean that I'm, like I said earlier, I'm just extremely obsessive with it. So sometimes my perfectionist ways get in the way of managing it, and that could then in turn lead to stress, right? So it's
I have to share with you. I don't know if you've seen it. It's probably been about 2 years, but I share it like at least once or twice per year. There's a post that I put up a while ago. It's called "I'm a bit obsessed with diabetes." and I am, and it's crazy because I truly love, and people look at me crazy when I say this. Like, I truly love diabetes. Like, I love the nuances of it. I love the research. I love the technology. Like, I love the science. Like, I love it all, and being able to help people be at their best and lessen the burden that is diabetes. Like, I truly love and enjoy that. But, and like when we talk about like hindsight and things, like if I had the opportunity to be without diabetes, take this away.
Yeah.
Like, take it away.
But then, when you take it away, because again, we see the blessing in it now, you take it away, certain things have to go with, other things will have to go with it. So for me, you take away the diabetes, that means I don't get processed out of the military. That means I don't get to raise my son. That means there are a lot of times when I have to go on deployment and I'm not around for him. That means I potentially miss out on certain milestones with him as he's growing up. That means there's there's pockets of time where core memories will not be made because I'm not there. So again, I may not like having diabetes. I may not want to be a diabetic, but I know that if I gave that part of me up, there's other things that would go with it. And I'm not willing to let go of those things. So
we can't go back and alter or change any of the things that have occurred within our lives or within anyone else's lives, because you alter one thing, even just a millisecond in time, it changes it changes everything moving forward.
Absolutely.
When we even there's films that have shown things such as if you leave your house at a certain time 5 seconds earlier and you forget to lock the door, or you forget to someone may have not said something to their child while they're headed to school or whatnot. And then when they show if they were to reverse that time and the people did implement or do these things, it truly alters every single thing moving forward.
Yes.
So I would not change time.
Yeah.
Now moving forward, that's a whole nother thing. But I did want to know we have not spoken about this, and as we wrap down, I did want to know about your diagnosis story.
As far as how did it come about?
Yes.
So as I mentioned earlier, diabetes presented itself for me during pregnancy. You get pregnant, you do that standard 1 hour drink that thing test, and they did that, and of course they pulled me back. I had to go back in and do the 3-hour test. Did the 3-hour test, and they realized that yes, you have gestational diabetes. And so that led to me going into the hospital for a few days so that they can teach me how to give myself injections, and also teach me about the differences of the two types of insulin that I had to take: long acting, fast acting. Had my son in November of 2004. Fast forward to April of 2005. So March, I'm going to say February, March timeframe, there were certain things that were starting to happen, but I was kind of just dismissing it. This symptoms were starting to present themselves, but I was dismissing it. And then finally, I just happened to be talking to a medical professional while at work. I was still active duty at that time. And I said, what are the signs of diabetes? Because back then Google might have been around, but it wasn't around to the point where people using it as, it wasn't a verb at the time. Did you Google that? It wasn't a verb just yet. So just asked, just threw it out there. And they said, why do you ask? I was like, well, I have this, and this going on. I was like, all right, you need to get to medical. Got to medical, and that first test that they did, I was coasting in the 500-600 range. And that was every day for 2-3 months, and not even realizing there was a problem. So once that happened, April timeframe, they initially diagnosed me as a type 2 diabetic. But within a week, they was like, nope, that's wrong, and switched it to a type 1. And that's pretty much my diagnosis story. Yeah. And then that just snowballed into a lot of other things that happened within a year and a half. A little bit more than a year and a half after that, I was processed out of the military.
Now, again, your diagnosis story is one that I have never heard, because when you're telling this story, and I'm sure people listening to it are be thinking about the same thing. Do you think that initial diagnosis during your pregnancy of gestational, I know in my head, I'm thinking she had type 1. She had type 1 diabetes.
Right. I know that. And again, hindsight, and, I may not fully or 100% acknowledge, or not acknowledge, but know this for a fact. But in hindsight, you start looking back. As I got older, I look back, or you reflect back on different things that were happening to me while I was younger and still living in the Caribbean. And this is why I'm a firm believer that things happen the way it's supposed to happen. I truly believe I've always been type 1. But because I have always been athletic, it kept it at bay. Because there were times where what I now know as DKA, I was experiencing that when I was young as well, where I would get sick and start throwing up. And of course, they think I'm faking it because I'm not throwing up anything, because that's what happens when you go into DKA. You might throw up initially what's in your stomach, but then you keep dry heaving after. Nothing's coming out, right? So I think even before I left the Caribbean, there were certain things that showed up that might have indicated that I was diabetic. Even coming into the military, you have to go through a medical. And I remember being at that medical and them saying, okay, she needs to go eat. Like her numbers are not looking right. And of course, I don't understand what they're talking about. I don't know what numbers that they're talking about. And I remember distinctively them saying, okay, she needs to go to Burger King and eat the cinnamon sticks, the French toast sticks, because, that's sugar and honey and all this other stuff, right? Or sweet syrup type stuff, because they were trying to get my numbers back up. Apparently I was low and I didn't realize it. I didn't know that. But again, being in the military, I'm very physical. So it kept it, I ran a lot, I worked out a lot and kept it at bay. But once I got pregnant, all of that just got messed up. So. It
was almost like how a lot of people, they get sick or viruses and it helps push forward that diagnosis.
Yeah.
But how, when you said how you were diagnosed during pregnancy, and I know that, the doctors, no fault of their own, that's what they diagnose when they find out someone has diabetes during pregnancy. That's gestational.
Yes. And even before my pregnancy, I had major surgery where I had a tumor against my pancreas. So, and we all know that's what creates insulin. So, there was already signs of problems with my pancreas, but again, the diabetes part didn't show up until pregnancy, or at least it didn't get picked up on until then.
Right. And you being so active and physically fit, it may have been you may have had a diagnosis initially at 15, 16 or so, but I've known people who had extended honeymoons, which is essentially LADA for 10, 12 years.
Yes.
And myself, I feel as though I had that also, because I'm telling you, I was biking, running, lifting, doing 1,500 push-ups, 2,100 sit-ups. I had this routine that I was doing. And then my family lost their house. And me and my younger brother were staying in a motel. So I wasn't able to do all of those things that I was doing. Okay. And that's where I started noticing, something's wrong with me.
Okay.
And I wasn't pregnant, but you being pregnant
is
Yeah.
But this also goes back to what we were talking about earlier about if you change certain things in your timeline of life, it leads you in a different way, right?
Right.
If I was diagnosed in the Caribbean, I may not have ever made it to the United States. If I was diagnosed while in high school, I would not have made it into the military. That means my son wouldn't have came along, right? If I had been diagnosed prior to the military, I feel the way I see how this particular industry sucks money out of people for the devices, for the actual insulin and all that stuff, and how crazy private insurance is. I may be struggling right now to afford what I need to stay alive. Right? I'm fortunate in that the way mine's played out, because my diagnosis was on active duty, it's considered service connected. I don't pay for anything. That's a luxury that I have. So it happened when it was supposed to happen.
Right. As much as we will never, I mean, people think that since we've had it for so long, 20 plus years, that we're comfortable. We're not comfortable with this. We will never be.
We're definitely not comfortable, but for us, it's like breathing. It's just a part of our life.
It's a part of our lives.
Yeah.
It's something we have to do to continue on to the next step and to continue our lives. Because when we think back 102 years ago, like the options didn't exist.
Right.
People diagnosed to live. Right. And today we have that option. And if I'm given the option of life or death, give me the insulin, give me the needle. Even though many people have phobias of it, I want to continue this life. I have people to live for. I have myself to live for. I still have dreams. I feel as though I'm not even at my halfway point in life at 41, because the average life expectancy is 76 to 78 years old. And that's even with living with type 1 diabetes. So on top of that, and knowing my own lifestyle, I know that I can extend and exceed that. So diabetes has its limitations, but it's not going to have its limitations on my life.
Right.
At all. And as we wrap up, Michelle, I must ask you this, and I ask everyone this question. As we look through and we just do a small recap, we just did a small recap on our conversation. And you did mention, like, we cannot retract or go back and change things, and we can't. But moving forward, today, on the day a cure is here, meaning a full cure, not meaning that we have to take immunosuppressants, and not meaning that we have to keep going in and get these cells and beta cells injected, or islet cells, and none of that. Like they found out a full cure for diabetes. On that day, we all wake up and we are diabetes free. You can send me a message, be like, Will, your diabetes not working today either? And we reach out to the community. We posted in the story. Is anyone's diabetes turn on today? Like, because, like, people, they really think we could turn this switch off and on with diabetes, but it's nonstop. On that day that a cure is here, Michelle, what do you do?
I don't know. I'm trying not to overthink this, because for me, medically, I would still need a pancreas because I don't have my entire pancreas anymore. So, but if what I have is left and they're able to say, okay, this is what needs to be done, and then you'll be cured, and there's no additional things you have to do for the rest of your life, all of the things that you mentioned, whether it be beta shots or immune suppressancy and all of this stuff, I think I would go for it. I would go for it with the understanding that I have lived a life with it. So I would still be able to help others that may not choose to go for it, right? Or they may not choose initially to go for it. And then after going for it, I'd be able to help others still after diabetes, I think I'd definitely be one to go for it because, again, obviously this is the path God wants me to walk, so let's walk it.
And on that day, do you celebrate at all?
Huh?
Do you celebrate at all?
celebrate what, like my diversity and
No,
stuff
do you
like that?
celebrate not having diabetes?
Yeah, I think I would celebrate not necessarily not having it, but living through it. Right? I survived. I persevered.
That's a
I
great,
came through.
that's a
came
great accomplishment.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, when we speak
Yep.
of having this condition, again, the nuances of it, people truly don't understand or never understand unless they're managing it.
Yes.
So to say that we made it, like we made it out on top of diabetes,
Yep.
that's a great milestone, a great
Yeah.
accomplishment, because we know so many people in our community that have not, and this will be a great
Yes.
this will be a great benefit for people moving forward, so
Yes.
that they won't have to go through the struggles, the ins and
Exactly.
outs.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
And on that note, Michelle, is there anything we did not cover that you wish that we should?
There isn't anything that we didn't cover, anything like that. But just to close it out, I'd like to say that no matter the obstacles that we are presented with in life, and since this topic is about diabetes, it's not the easiest to live with, but it doesn't mean that you can't. You have to go into it, as with any difficulties that we have to get through in life. You have to give yourself grace with it. I know I mentioned earlier that sometimes I'm extremely obsessive or I'm a perfectionist with certain things in my life and get a little OCD with certain things in my life. But on the days that I'm going too far overboard with stressing about it or being obsessive about it, you have to learn to give yourself grace. Another big thing is, as with anything else in life, you have to be willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So living with this disease, again, what you may have done yesterday may not work today. That doesn't mean it doesn't work anymore, right? So you just have to be willing to learn, unlearn, relearn, learn, unlearn, relearn. And if you keep that mindset with anything, but especially with this disease, you will get through every day. You will get through every day.
Michelle, on that note, thank you. I truly appreciate you for joining me on the Chronically Will podcast, where we hold real conversations with community that need to be heard. And Michelle, you are someone that truly needs to be heard.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and be heard.
Thank you.